And welcome to another episode of Real Dad's Lead. I'm your host, Dwayne Smith. Next to me, Mr. Matt Hamilton. Matt doesn't know I'm going to ask this question. But last episode, for those who are watching on YouTube, we had this little diatribe on some chemicals, forever chemicals. And today he's got no glasses on, so I'm assuming that he's got contacts on. So what's the deal?
It's because I was going to go to work today, and it was just easier to put them in. Oftentimes my glasses fall off, and then,
Yeah.
So I'll probably go back and forth.
Yeah.
But today.
That's what I assumed.
I thought you were going to call me out on it.
You got it. I did. It reminded me because I decided I was going to do some of the reading today, and I started looking at it. I was like, oh, man, I can't read this without my glasses. So I don't actually wear glasses, but for regular glasses, but I do for reading.
Yeah. You have one of those like floral patterned Walmart glasses?
Walmart, but not floral.
Okay.
Floral pattern. It was interesting because I never thought that I would need reading glasses. Mm-hmm. Not never, but eventually probably. But I was doing this acting on a Christmas show, and during the rehearsals, and I was an old man, and so I was trying to act the part. And I had some prop glasses, but they didn't have any prescription lens in them at all. They were clear, but I couldn't find them. And so I decided to run to like CVS or something and just grab the lowest prescription of the one for a prop. Mm-hmm. And they were, low on my nose, so it's not like I was going to be looking through them, whatever. But on part of it, I had to read something in the show. I had to read something.
You had to take them off to read.
And I looked down, and with my glasses, I was like,
so
what?
You realized.
I could, why is this so nice, clear, and big?
That's funny.
And I thought, and I'd put them off, and everything was all fuzzy. I'm like, oh, my goodness. So I realized that I guess now I need reading glasses.
Yeah, it's
reading
a
glasses.
Accident.
It's not that I need them because I can read without it pretty fine. It's just like when I put them on, it's so much clearer, it's so much bigger. But then when I look up, I can't see anything. I got to take them off. So, but it was interesting to me. I don't know if that's what everyone feels when they first decide to try reading glasses, or if I got the same feeling that people when they have bad eyesight, not 20/20, and then they get glasses for the first time, or when the optometrist, I was getting ready to say obstetrician, but that's not the same person.
I don't know what is that?
Like the baby doctors.
Okay.
So I was like, no, that's not right. Optometrist.
Yeah, optometrist.
When they're first going through the lenses, of like, oh man, not realizing. I know my kids when they were first getting glasses, Chad, I remember distinctly thinking like, this is magic. Like, oh my goodness, I can see is what everyone else sees. So at any rate, I'm going to be wearing my glasses if I'm going to read a little bit today.
Nice.
So we're going to continue on our series of fathers in the Bible, and we went through Adam pretty quick, Noah fairly quick because there's not a ton about them. Abraham, there's a lot. So we went through chapter 12 last week. Let's go to chapter 13 this week. It's not super long. It's like 18 verses. I'll just read a little bit, and then we can kind of comment.
Okay.
Does that sound fine to you on that?
Pull those babies out.
Well, it's just regular. I can see it's not bad. I can't even put them on my face without poking my eye. So, chapter 13 of Genesis starts off. Abram went up from Egypt to the Negev, he and his wife and all he had, and Lot with him. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver and gold. He went by stages from the Negev to Bethel, to the place between Bethel and Ai. Do you say Ai or I? We've just been
That's
talking
AI.
about AI this whole
Yeah.
time.
Just before
Right before we got on air. Where his tent had formerly been, to the site where he had built the altar, and Abram called on the name of the Lord there. Interesting, because we were talking about altar building last week, and I just looked at you. I'm like, oh. We had talked about Abram building an altar last week, and I've got a few things in mind. I've still been just really pondering on this whole altar building thing and some ideas. So stay tuned. Maybe some of these ideas will come to fruition. But just from those first 4 verses, anything pop out at you as we go?
Not immediately. No.
First thing that popped out at me was that Abram, he had all that he had, but he had Lot with him. And we talk about, Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham. I am one of them, so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. Right arm.
Right arm. Yeah.
This is my left, but maybe on camera it's my right arm. The idea that when we're talking about, as real dads leads do, talk about fatherhood, you don't have to be a father to a natural biological birth son, but we are called to be fathers to many sons, I think, as well. So fathers to the fatherless, fathers to those who are just in our care, father figures to just boys in general, I think, and girls as well. But it just stuck out to me that he took care of Lot. So,
and Lot is, he's a man at this point.
Right.
I don't know if there's any indication as to how young he was when his father died, Haran. But either way, Abraham takes him into his own household, it seems, and begins to care for him and
teach him,
help him develop, into a man, so much so that he has his own possessions and livestock and servants, and yeah.
And that was another thing, because it said that in verse 2 that he was very rich. Abram was very rich in livestock, silver and gold. We had this discussion at a men's Bible study last night, and we're in Ecclesiastes, is where the book that we're studying, and it just talked about how meaningless it is to gather, possessions and all that kind of stuff, and like chasing after the wind. The idea of, in that discussion, people were talking about, is it bad for me to try and achieve? Is it bad for me to work hard and get stuff? And so we kind of had that discussion. I don't know. I know you've struggled with that in your life as far as, do we need all this stuff? Do I need this? Should I be selling it and giving it to people? And I don't know. I think there's 2 sides to that. And what are your thoughts, your immediate thoughts? That
this is all off the cuff, so because you're trying to compare it to the fact that Abraham has all these possessions, right?
He does, yeah, right.
I think my initial thought as to why he has all these possessions, first of all, I don't know. I think as a nomad, he's probably, there's not so many poor around him. And globally, or speaking today, because of globalization, we are so much more aware of all the needs that exist in the world. Where like in the past, it's probably like your town that you're aware of. And beyond that, not really anything. Where we live in the internet age, the age of technology, the age where we know in a matter of minutes what's happening literally on the other side of the planet. We're aware of the injustices going on in China, for example, and there are endless possibilities for us to be generous in that case. It may not have been the way for Abraham, but I don't doubt that when he did have opportunity, he was generous. two people. But I think that God was blessing him, choosing to bless him in this way. I think we touched on this a little bit last week, because he is going to make of him a great nation, right? So Abraham is the foundation for this great nation. So I think that probably has something to do with it. What I said last week is I don't think that we should equate blessing with the reception of many possessions. Mm-hmm. And that's a mistake that we do make, especially in a capitalistic nation like America. The church makes it just as anybody else does, and I don't think that that's the case. I mean, Jesus was not wealthy. None of the apostles were wealthy, and we would certainly say that they were blessed. And when Jesus talks about, in his Beatitudes, blessed is the man who, or the one who, it says nothing about wealth, So I don't think blessing and wealth are necessarily connected. However, he chooses to bless some with wealth at times. It's hard to discern whether or not he has blessed you with wealth or not sometimes. But I think that the emphasis in the Gospels for sure is on generosity. Luke in Acts records Jesus as saying, even though it's not recorded in the Gospels, it's more blessed to give than to receive. Jesus is constantly praising people for their generosity or calling them to sacrificial giving. The widow, who has literally 2 mites or 2 pennies to her name, does what we would call foolish and gives it all away. She doesn't know where her next meal is coming from. She can't pay for her housing or whatever else bills she may have had at that time. But Jesus doesn't say she's foolish. He praises her for her faith. And of course, he calls the rich young ruler to sell all of his possessions and give them to the poor. He uses the word all there. In Matthew 6, and then it's parallel, especially in Luke 12, he says it's the Father's desire to give you the kingdom. And then right after that, he says, therefore, sell your possessions and give to the poor, so that you might store up treasure for yourselves in heaven. So I think that that's to be the direction of our life overall. I think the Christian life, biblically speaking, is to live simply and give generously.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't have to be necessarily be that pursuit, because there are, like you had said, there are people who have been able to bless others because of their
income, right?
Or
so the question there though becomes like, why is God blessing you? This is what I said last week. I think some of the early church fathers would talk about God blessing you or making you rich as a test to see what it is that you'll do with that money. Are you going to hoard it? Are you going to keep it to yourself? Are you going to be like the fool, again, earlier in Luke 12, who says, I got an abundance here, but my barns can't hold it, so what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. Instead of being generous with it, he says, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down my old barns, build bigger ones, and I'll kick back and relax and say, soul, be merry, whatever you're provided for years to come. And he says, you fool, your life is required of you this very night. Mm-hmm. So it is with all who do not store up treasure toward God. So, yeah, those people are receiving this money, and they are able to, and many are faithful to, bless others with it. But I do think that I do think, I'm still thinking. So
here's the thing that I look at some of those things, because I know that I have been recipient of those blessings from people who have much, whether it's been money, personal money that's come straight from them, or gifts of vehicles, or gifts of trips, or gifts of whatever, that to be able to enjoy. But it was a generosity that was given. Right. And so it's like, okay, if God has blessed you, it is your job to be generous with that, and to seek to say, okay, Lord, you have blessed me with this. How can I use this for your glory?
Right.
I think that's even because you can also get to the point where some people with this idea that you're talking about of living simply, are basically challenging or not commanding, what's the word I'm looking for, would urge other people to live simply as well, just like this idea of giving everything away. But we need those who are not giving everything away and supporting ministries.
Well, I don't
doing
think
those things
living
as well.
simply and giving everything away are necessarily equal to
Okay.
one another. I mean, somebody can. So, for example, you might have consistent resources that are just coming in, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're spending those resources on, bigger houses than you really need. Multiple cars, more expensive cars than you need. Lots of vacations or lots and lots of clothes, or like you can live simply, and as that money's coming in, be using it for actual needs. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? So that would be my challenge to somebody. I mean, it is hard for me. I started to have a shift a couple years ago when I think about, just as an example, for roughly $1,000 on average, when I look at these different orgs that help women come out of trafficking, that covers rescue, it covers rehabilitation, it covers job training, it covers placement in a new home, getting them on their own feet, just $1,000. And I'm looking around my house, and I might have a couch in my house where that was originally $1,000, or a set of couches, whatever, and it's in a room that we never sit in. Like that is the ransom for someone. Mm-hmm. That's the point, and so there's all these needs that people have right now, and we keep things either for our own comfort or convenience, or out of fear that we might need them tomorrow. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I just think that there are also other reasons for having certain things. I've learned this a little bit more in being in business itself. And especially those who are like in sales or different things to that effect, where the look that you have is also is important.
The way you look,
what you're driving.
So, for example, if you need a suit for a particular job, it's not going to pay to have just a pair of jeans.
Yeah. Or if you're driving up in for a sales meeting or whatever, and you're driving up in a beat up whatever, and the person's like, I'm not buying from you. It's just the idea that there are certain things that, at least in our first world country, just need to have in order to do their job, I guess. I've met people who would lose clients if they didn't look a certain part, and still believe that God has placed them in this place to minister to that type of people as well. So I do think that it's not just what you have, like you're saying, it's how you're using it, but it's also how others perceive you, so that you can be ministering to them in a different way. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does,
to you.
Yeah. I do have some thoughts about it, and I'm still working it out. But this could probably take a whole podcast. So
right. Well, let's move on then, because the other thing I thought about in there, well, I told you about the altar building already. But that's, he's still pursuing what God has told him to do. So he didn't settle in Egypt where he was. He got up and he left. And God has told him, go to this place where I am telling you, and he's still doing that, which I thought was good. Let's move on to verse 5. Says, now Lot, who was traveling with Abram, also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land was able to support them as long as they stayed together. For they had so many possessions that they could not stay together. And there was quarreling between herdsmen of Abraham and livestock in the herds. Sorry, probably need to put my glasses on. Oh, goodness. And there was quarreling between the herdsmen of Abraham's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. At the time, the Canaanites and the Perizzites were living in the land. So Abraham said to Lot, "Please, let's not have quarreling between you and me, or between your herdsmen and my herdsmen, since we are relatives. Isn't the whole land here before you? Separate from me. If I go to the left, if you go to the left, I will go to the right. And if you go to the right, I will go to the left." So Lot looked out and saw that the entire plain of Jordan, as far as Zoar, was well watered everywhere, like the Lord's garden in the land of Egypt. This was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. So Lot chose the entire plain of the Jordan for himself. Then Lot journeyed eastward, and they separated from each other. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, but Lot lived in the cities and in the plain, and set up his tent near Sodom. Now the men of Sodom were evil, sinning immensely against the Lord. So, first thing that struck me is that I felt like Abram was a peacemaker. And so there was quarreling and between their herdsmen. I don't think there was quarreling between Lot and himself, right? It just between their the herdsmen.
But there was potential for it.
Yeah. And he was selfless in that. What did you notice?
Yeah, I've always, even from my teen years, I remember reading this story and being moved by his giving preference to the other person so as to maintain peace. You know, he's not selfish or greedy to obtain the better part of the land, which, you know, immediately applies to us. I shouldn't be greedy to take or have the better part of anything, you know, whether it's the best looking cookie or it's the best, most fertile ground, you know, but to give preference to the other person, to kind of lay down in essence and let them have that so as to maintain peace. But also to maintain, I think, a heart of detachment from the things of the world. So anyway, yeah, that's always greatly impressed me, actually, this story.
Yeah, I thought that was selfless of him, and you had said that maybe because isn't that where he was supposed to go to Canaan? Mm-hmm. Isn't that where God?
So God had already promised him this land to his descendants.
Yeah. So it's almost like I'm just wondering if Lot chose Canaan.
I'm trying to think here. So actually, I want to make sure that I'm right. It may not be until there's a verse where it talks about how everywhere he places his foot. Mm-hmm. I can't remember, but if I think that's correct. I think that he's already said that this will be your land. So if that's the case, then like what I was saying was, you know, could he could he be thinking, God has promised me all this land anyway, and so he's just in faith stepping to the side right now, you know, to maintain peace, which is still a godly response, right? And he's just waiting on the Lord for the Lord's timing, for him and his descendants to have this property. So,
you know, what gets me, what I was like looking at it, I was thinking the theme of good versus evil, Satan's his way of doing things, his mode of operation is to entice you into something. And Lot looks and sees, oh man, that's lush, that's the nice land.
So
that's
he makes the selfish decision.
And then he goes there, and then at the end of that section, it's like people there are just evil.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's that whole idea of still being enticed
Right.
by something that appears to be great.
Yeah, and I don't think it's by accident or coincidence that the people of Sodom were in that part of the land. I think that the text reads like, it seems to me, Lot was not a peacemaker in this sense. He didn't give preference to his uncle, his elder, the head of the home, right?
Mm-hmm.
He decided to take the land that looked best to him, even though he knew Abraham would want that as well. I mean, who wouldn't want it? He makes the selfish decision to take it for himself, and that leads him in a direction that takes him to a very bad place. So that by chapter 19, he's not only camping out near the city, but he's actually in the city. Some would argue helping to judge the city because he sits at the city gate, and his family's a moral mess, right? His wife ends up dying. He gets both of his daughters pregnant. It's a crazy story, but it all starts with this selfish decision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is probably in his heart all along.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to anything else in that section that you can that you saw. 14. After Lot had separated from him, the Lord said to Abram, "Look from the place where you are. Look north and south, east and west, for I will give you and your offspring forever all the land that you see. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that anyone could count the dust of the earth. So if anyone could count the dust of the earth, then your offspring could be counted. Get up and walk the land. Through this, I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to put my glasses on. I don't wear them that much. So. Get up and walk around the land through its length and width, for I will give it to you." So Abram moved his tent and went to live near the oaks of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. Another altar.
Yeah. He's an altar building machine.
He is an altar building machine.
So here it is. I can't remember because this is all kind of, we're doing this as we go. So I clearly didn't read the chapter before we started, but this is where he is promising him all of this land. Look east, west, north, south. Go and walk the land. I'm going to give it all to you. And so maybe, too, we're supposed to take, at least in part from this passage, that God is here rewarding Abraham's selflessness, his lack of greediness, his faith in the Lord. Maybe what's going through Abram's mind right now is, God promised that he's going to bless me. I don't know how he's going to do it, but I'm willing to sacrifice the better part of the land to maintain peace with my kinsmen. And I know because God has promised to bless me that I'll be all right anyway. And God responds here with, wherever you cast your eyes, everything around you, do a complete 160 or 360, and it's all yours. That's pretty exciting.
It is pretty exciting. Yeah, I when we're talking about Abram as a father, since we're doing fathers of the Bible, a lot of that stuff, preparation to be a father, is what's going on before you become a father. And so I know that there's men out there who are not fathers just yet, and God is preparing you to be a father of nations, having a legacy, possibly. And these are just some of the things looking through that decisions that have been made, and the character that Abram is displaying, and the character that he is developing, because we read in the last chapter there's some character flaws. But this looks like there's a little bit of growth in that, like you said, being a little bit more selfless and humble and accepting what God's giving him. So I do like the idea of continuing to go through and not just reading about him and Isaac, but and Ishmael, but what is this preparation? How's God making you a man into someone who will eventually be the father of many nations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, any other thoughts on that? Let me look at my notes.
You need your glasses.
No, I think that's it on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would second that. Hindsight is 2020, unfortunately. And I think inevitably we're all going to look back. Hindsight will always be 2020. No one's going to listen to this message and be like, oh man, they're absolutely right. I'm going to get it right the first time, everything right the first time, and not look back with some kind of regret or awareness, that they didn't previously have. But that being said, I do think there's a lot of value in older men sharing things like that with younger men. In this case, pre-fatherhood, because I didn't have that. I didn't have somebody lay it out for me like that,
Mm-hmm.
that who you are today or who you are becoming today is who you will be for your wife and your children.
Yeah.
And you can't wait until you're married or until you're holding that baby in your arms in the hospital for the first time to change, because change just doesn't come that quickly. In most cases, it just doesn't, no matter how bad you want it to. So your addictions, your bad habits, your vices, they're not going to go away overnight, let alone in a moment, let alone when you say I do, or when you're looking into that baby's face. They take time. This is the time God's giving you right now in preparation.
Right.
You need to be killing your old man wherever he shows his ugly face, and you need to be submitting daily to the Lord and replacing your vices with your virtues, and replacing your
Breech.
your bad habits with godly disciplines, such as what we've said before. Getting into that discipline, and it's called a discipline because it requires discipline. It's painful, right? We've said many times before, good habits are a lot more difficult to keep or to start and to keep than bad habits are. So starting to discipline yourself to become a man of the word on a daily basis. Blessed is the man whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on it day and night, right? Yeah. Psalm 1. So again, who you are becoming today will be who you are for your wife and for your kids in the future, and you have to start making that change now.
Yeah. I have a cousin. He lives in Cleveland now, but her husband, Trey Lewis, they post some things on TikTok and Instagram and stuff, and I had watched one of his, he was doing an interview actually, and they were talking about, he used to be praying for a wife, and I know that I would do that for my kids, and some of my kids are praying, they would pray for a wife, and he transitioned it. He said he stopped and started praying for himself to be
that man,
the man that his future wife will need. And I really liked that. It was just the way he had a change in his perception of what he should be praying for. Not just for a wife that's going to provide for my needs, but for me to be the man that she will need.
Right.
And I really appreciated that comment that he made. But I do think that you're right. Like, if we start implementing the things that we want, it's not just going to happen. It's not, we get married, now we're going to be this man. It is, and it totally will be the opposite. Like, if you're not disciplined in your life right now, just because you're married, it's not just going to switch off and change. In the area of, especially we talk about a lot, which men struggle a lot in the area of sensuality, sexuality, pornography, and things like that. I can't tell you how many men think that once I get married, all that stuff goes away.
Yeah.
You know, it'll change.
if-
I won't need all that.
Right.
because
That
of whatever.
intimacy with your wife is going to take away that addiction.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's just a lie.
Just a lie. So, but I think that's in all areas of life. You know, just because you get married, that all these things that you have been doing are not just going to be.
It's similar to like if you have an addiction to sweets, you're thinking, man, as soon as I get a good wholesome meal, I won't crave those sweets anymore.
Right.
That's obviously not true. It's the same way.
Yeah, exactly. So I do think that's valuable to look at Abram's life and his progression to the man that he's going to be.
Yeah. I wanted to say another similar story. So there's an Orthodox priest. His name's Father Josiah Trenum. And I saw a reel that he had the other day where he said when he was 15, he told his dad he wanted to get married. And his dad was like, yeah, you're a little too young. He said, maybe 18, you know, that we'll reconsider it. But he said, I can't remember if it was his dad or another godly man in his life at the time, told him to create a list. Right up there at the top, my future spouse, create a list of everything that he was looking for in that future spouse. And so he wrote it out, finished it, showed the guy his list, and the guy handed it back, and he said, I want you to erase my future spouse now at the top.
Oh.
And I want you to write your own name there. And I want you to work on becoming all of those things that you want your wife to be, you know. And that just radically changed his mindset. So very similar to what you were saying before.
Oh, I like that. Huh.
If you want a 10 or an 11, let's say, you got to be an 11.
Yeah.
You know, you should be striving for that yourself.
Yeah.
So it's good advice.
Yeah, I think so. Is there anything else on this chapter?
No, I think it's a pretty fast podcast for us. I don't know. I feel like we need to talk about something.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, I'll go ahead and let's just wrap this up. And any of you who are listening or watching on YouTube, if you can put some comments, if you have any ideas or any comments that you want to make, please do so. And I think we'll wrap it up with that.
Yeah.
So always remember that real dads lead.